Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Celtic Way. I am your host, John McGinley. We're here to chat through a pretty dramatic weekend in the Scottish Premiership, all things considered. Right across the board, there was drama with late goals on Saturday, Ryan, drama with late goals yesterday, managerial sackings. There's quite a lot to get into today. We're going to focus on Celtic, as always, of course. Plenty to chat about yesterday's match at home to Motherwell, which, Ryan, you were there. You felt the energy in the stadium. You felt the build-up of anxiety until around the hour mark. You felt the surge towards the end and the comeback victory. How do you sum up your feelings after a pretty tense but cathartic day at Celtic Park? Is that fair?
I think that would be fair to say. Yeah, I think the supporters that were in attendance and whoever else was in attendance as well. In fact, both sets of supporters were probably put through the ringer yesterday. It was an exciting match. If it was on the TV, I don't think anyone would have been complaining as a neutral, because it was a wild game. It went from one way to the other, and then with that dramatic conclusion as well. Yeah, the energy was. I think we felt every sort of energy from that game, from the positive of Iheanacho scoring his first home goal to the complete negative, almost toxicity when Celtic went 2-1 behind, to then that surge of positivity when Celtic got the equaliser and then they went on to get the winner. So yeah, it was you felt every emotion yesterday, but I think the overriding one was relief at the fact that Celtic got the 3 points and they got it done, because anything else would have been. Yes, it would have been thinkable, but it was unthinkable as well, given the context of the way the season's going so far. Something had to give yesterday, and thankfully Celtic got that 3 points yesterday.
Yeah, we'll dig into everything in a moment. But first, a word from our sponsors. It's Simply Furniture, located in Hillington, Glasgow. They're an independent brand dedicated to bringing luxury and contemporary style into homes across the UK. From elegant sofas to statement dining sets, It's Simply Furniture's handpicked collections offer exceptional value without compromising on style. They have a dedicated team to ensure your furniture is delivered with care right to your doorstep. If you want to see their range up close, you can visit their showroom in Hillington, Glasgow. And if you mention the Celtic Way, you will get a special in-store discount. There are links below if you want to check them out. So, Ryan, how are we feeling about yesterday in the context of the season? Because obviously, Brendan Rodgers himself admitted that Celtic were nowhere near their level yesterday, and I think that's fair to say. And I don't think we should particularly shy away from that. Brendan Rodgers said, "I thought our players deserved it. The mentality of going behind the game. It's not easy to play here when you go in behind. We kept fighting. Subs coming into the game made a great impact for us," which I do want to touch on in a moment. That final 15 minutes of the game where we had them pinned back and moving the ball at speed and creating opportunities was great to see. We're nowhere near our level. That's the reality. I think we can all see that in terms of where they would want us to be, but you have to get results when you're a player or a manager for Celtic. You have to find a way. You have to dig deep and show how the players did that today. Now, the title of the video is "Did Celtic just hit a turning point?" That might be slightly dramatic. I'm not trying to over-egg what yesterday was, but I just got a feeling that something clicked yesterday in the final half an hour. And yes, that urgency came out of necessity, and I think it's not a great place for Celtic to be in, where they have to go behind with 35 minutes to go to spark into life, if you will. But I think Rodgers is right. The substitutions worked. I think moving Diaz and Maeda back onto the left-hand side worked, Ryan. And I think there's a lot to consider for the manager just going into this next spell after the international break. You know, it was a big half an hour for Celtic. I don't know if we've lost connection here. I've certainly lost Ryan. People in the live chat can maybe let me know if they have also lost Ryan. He's a black spinning circle for myself at the moment, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, after the international break, I'll just wait and see if Ryan does come back for myself. It could be my connection too. That sometimes does happen. But just coming back from the international break, Celtic have massive fixtures ahead. Celtic's next 7 fixtures ahead of the next international break are Dundee, Sturm Graz, Hearts, Falkirk, Rangers, Midtjylland and Kilmarnock. That's a defining period for Celtic. And I think Celtic do need to get their act together, and I'm not trying to gloss over the negatives of yesterday because I think there were many. I just feel that last half an hour with the tactical changes Brendan Rodgers made, and Nygren coming into that midfield and really showing a little bit of urgency, and perhaps more urgency than he showed for a few weeks, certainly positive signs for me. Yeah, everyone's saying Ryan disappeared, so I will just be myself for the moment, guys. We'll bring in some questions. Look, you can help me out with some questions from the live chat while we try and get Ryan back on the stream, if that's okay, everyone. I'll just take this graphic down at the moment, and it'll just be me. It's just me. Hello, everyone. How are you doing? How do you feel about yesterday? That's what we'd like to know as well. I noticed a comment at the start, Connor McLeod saying, "We were dreadful yesterday. What are you talking about? A turning point, no chance. We will lose the Hearts in a few weeks' time. I have no doubts." I certainly am sensing elements of negativity from yesterday as well, which we'll get into. Ryan, you're back. Your connection dropped off there.
Yeah, it went off there. Sorry about that, guys. I think we're still feeling the remnants of Storm Amy where I'm from. There's a little bit of damage here and there. So hopefully that's it sorted. But internet connection isn't the best here as it is. So any outside factors coming into that are a bit of a problem. What was the point that you were?
I was talking about you've just frozen again, unfortunately, so we'll need to see if you disappear again. I was essentially just talking about the last half an hour, Ryan, and kind of the tactical changes that Brendan Rodgers made. Dyson Maeda moving back onto the left. I thought Nygren coming into the game had a good impact. I thought Engels coming into the game yesterday had a good impact. I was looking at, and I don't think Arne Engels has started a match alongside Benjamin Nygren in mid when both of them are in midfield. They both started at Ibrox, but Nygren was on the right hand side, which was interesting. So I think maybe a midfield of Nygren and Engels might be the way to go with McGregor. Maybe that's clutching at straws. We know there's been issues with the midfield. As I say that, I know Ryan's just disappeared again, so I'm going to just pull him out of the stream while he returns. Listen, given I'm on my own today, help me with the comments, help me with some questions today, guys, and I'll try and shape the show around that. Obviously, Ryan's having some connection problems today, so we'll have to figure that out going forward. Hazel Finn at saying, Balak Wisha was definitely ready for that game yesterday, liked him getting the fans up for the game. And listen, I noticed a bit of that towards the end of the match as well, Hazel, in that both Balak Wisha was obviously very animated and very motivated. I think Kelechi Iheanacho was also similarly just desperate for Celtic to win yesterday. I know he was substituted off, but there's footage of him on the touchline. I don't know if you've seen it on social media where he's kicking every ball in those last 10 minutes of the match. You know, he's looking for everything, and obviously he runs down the touchline as well at the end, and glory scenes of celebration, which I think is important for these kind of new players to feel, and kind of get a sense of what the power of Celtic can be. You know, I think it can be difficult to come into Celtic, especially when everything's so pressured and there's a lot of negativity around the club. I think it's important for people to feel that coming into the club, and I think that's certainly in the case of Michelangelo Balak Wisha as well. Brendan Rodgers said after the game on Balak Wisha, he needed to feel something in the game. It's not easy for these guys to come in to play for Celtic. Rodgers says he's spoken to them because when you come into Celtic, you look on the outside and you see trophies and you see big games and you see European football and it all looks great. But then when they come in and realise the expectation is something different, and that's something that they need to get used to. We will try Ryan again. He is coming in again. His connections problems are ongoing. I'll save some comments in case Ryan disappears again. So thank you for the questions and comments while he was off. Ryan, I'm just kind of talking about the sense of moment and the changes that Brendan Rodgers made yesterday, and whether that's something that he has to consider over the international break. For instance, Dyson Maeda on the left and just maybe Nygren and Engels in midfield. I made the point there that they've not actually started the game in midfield together. They both started at Ibrox, but Nygren was on the right wing. That combination seemed to work for me yesterday. I don't know if it was just the moment and the urgency of the game that required that, but I thought both of them played well coming off the bench.
Yeah, they both made an impact. Nygren got the equalising goal, and Engels played a key pass to Balak Wisha, who I was delighted to see get that goal contribution as well by way of an assist. It was really good to see that, and it's a moment that he can cling on to over the international break. I noticed last night he was He was on Instagram referencing a couple of things, so he seems pretty happy that he's been involved with Celtic, which is great. And Brendan Rodgers, and I heard you speaking about what he had to say about how it's been a bit of a blur for him since coming to Celtic. He's found it maybe a little bit more difficult to adapt to his new surroundings, but that's something that he can cling on to over the international break and really work towards when he comes back. So I'm delighted with all three of their contributions. Engels and Negrin, they made a positive impact when they came on. I don't think Engels was perfect, but when it mattered, when it really, when the going got tough, he played that pass through, and Celtic got the win because of that, because he starts the move, which allows Balikwisha to put the ball into Daisen Maeda. On Maeda, I think the right just does not suit him whatsoever. He's really ineffective there, and Brendan Rodgers himself mentioned it after the game. He instantly made more of an impact when he was put into the middle, because that's one of the areas where he is more effective for Celtic. So whether it's on the left or through the middle, I don't
I
really
even
know.
thought, before because he didn't go into the middle straight away. I even thought just coming off the right, going on to the left, and obviously going through the middle. I just thought it's immediately clear that he's just not suited to that right wing role for me. And I guess that's something Brendan Rodgers needs to find an answer for. He was asked yesterday about the right wing situation by my good friend Stevie from the podcast Gig Pod. I'm sure maybe people do listen to that or see him on Hamish's channel from time to time. I'm friends with Stevie, and he was at one of the fan media representatives at yesterday's press conference, and he asked about the right wing situation, and look, he said, this is the question. He was like, the tendency with Daisen when he's been on the right, he's not been as productive. When he's on the left and in the middle, look more like himself. The himself of last season. Is that something you're going to be persistent with? And Roger's answer was funny. He said, I don't really know. We're constantly trying to find, then I don't know. And then he went like this to Stevie, not unless you can play on the right, can you? Which kind of sums it up at the moment. I don't think Brendan Rodgers quite knows what the solution is on that right wing at the moment, Ryan. I guess, that's... I'm not sure it would be. I'm not sure it's damning of Brendan Rodgers, because I think it's just the situation he's been given after the summer break. But I think he needs to find something much more functional on that right flank than what we're getting at the moment.
Yeah, I think it's damning for the recruitment more than anything else, that Celtic have signed so many left-sided players that on the right side they're having to accommodate other players. Celtic's best player last season was Daisen Maeda, and he's having to accommodate on the right just to provide a little bit of balance, because your other alternative is to play James Forrest, who was effective when he came on yesterday, or Yang, who's not even been on the bench some weeks. So it's not an ideal situation. Tenetki's played well, but now I feel as if his form isn't as good as what it was a couple of weeks ago. Maybe now's the opportunity, coming back from the international break, to maybe put Daisen Maeda on the left again, to put him back to where he's used to. Either that or play him through the middle. But then again, Ian Acho, I thought, was pretty decent yesterday. Scored his first goal at Celtic Park. So I wouldn't blame Brendan Rodgers too much on this one, because he can only work with the players that he's got, and he doesn't have a lot of right-sided players that can positively impact the game at this moment in time. I can pretty much guarantee you that that'll be one of the first areas that Celtic will look to strengthen in January, because the balance is not there, and you're having to accommodate different players in different positions. So I think that right-sided player will be looked at in the opening weeks in January to right that wrong. But it is really poor recruitment that they've got so many players. I've spoke about it a number of times. The squad depth chart that we had on the site was so lopsided on the left-hand side compared to the right-hand side. There was almost an overflow of left-sided players, but on the right-hand side there was, 2, maybe 3. So it's not an ideal situation, and it's one that needs to be remedied just now. Whatever quick fix that Brendan Rodgers can do, and then fixed fully in January ahead of the second half of the season.
I mean, I think for me, it's almost irrelevant, like looking ahead to January, because as I said, as I put up there, this is Celtic's next 7 fixtures, and Celtic need a functional right wing for these matches, because a lot of them are tough. I mean, Dundee away, you would hope that Celtic are energised and come back after the international break ready for that one, but then you've got another Europa League game at home against the team that have just won on match day 2. Then it's away to Hearts. Now, we'll get on to Hearts in a moment. We've got Rangers in the League Cup semi-final at Hampden. We'll get onto them in a moment as well. There's been a lot going on with them. Then it's Michelin, away from home. And for me, this is a defining period of the season, Ryan. This is massive. A lot of games here will, tell us about the trajectory of where Celtic season goes. I don't think that's hyping that up too much. Just on Hearts, Ryan, they obviously got a last-minute winner against Hibs on Saturday. Everyone's talking around the hype around them. This is the league table as it stands going into the international break. They're 2 points clear of Celtic. I'm not going to want to go on too much about Hearts, but just looking ahead to Tynecastle, that game is now absolutely pivotal. Like it's arguably Celtic's biggest match in the next few weeks.
Yeah, probably Celtic's biggest game of the season so far domestically, I would say, as well. I know Rangers at Ibrox, but even in the early weeks, it was already looking as if Rangers were going to struggle to maintain any sort of positive form. But Hearts have been the form team. It doesn't matter how they win. I know they got a last minute winner from their centre back, Craig Halkett, but by all accounts it was a good finish from the centre back, and they won an Edinburgh derby, so they'll be feeling really, really good about themselves. They'll have their tails up going into that game, and perhaps more importantly, they don't have any European fixtures to negotiate ahead of that game. They can just focus on their domestic games, and that can help them, if especially if they're in good form in the Scottish Premiership, because they'll just work from game to game. They're not in the League Cup either. They get put out early doors to St Mirren, so they're focusing right now, until the Scottish Cup comes around, they're focusing only on domestic football in the Scottish Premiership, so it means that they've got all eyes on that. And it's already a massive game at Tynecastle. It's going to be a real pressured environment. It's going to be some atmosphere in Edinburgh. But at the same time, Tony was making this point yesterday in the post-match show. These are the games that you look forward to as well. It's not a game that Celtic should dread or be apprehensive about. It's a big game against a side that have started really well this season. But it's also an opportunity for Celtic to show that they still are the dominant force in Scotland. They can still win these pressured games. So, yeah, it's a massive game. Hearts have done really well. They deserve to be where they are. The stats don't lie. The table doesn't lie. But we're already looking ahead to that massive game at Tynecastle, and you're hoping that once that comes around, Celtic will be in a better place for it and they can get the win.
I guess my response to that would be, when was the last time Celtic won a pressure game? Like it's been a while.
Very, very good point.
It's not happened really this calendar year, I would argue. Which is,
unless you count yesterday, John.
Yeah, I know. But for me, that was Celtic rescuing themselves from a disaster almost. I mean, you felt it in the stadium after they scored the second goal. There was a few misplaced passes. There was a couple of moments where things were getting very toxic and it was all going quite downhill. And I thought the players to find their composure within that is to their credit, as well. And I guess that's what I mean by it being almost a turning point. Now, I just think the urgency Celtic showed in that last half an hour, the players need to get in their brain that that's required from the off, because it was another poor start yesterday, Ryan. And Brendan Rodgers talks consistently about how fast starts are the hallmarks of his football and teams. I've seen no evidence of it this season at all. Celtic hadn't scored a first half goal in the league since August before yesterday, and it was a penalty as well. It wasn't hardly a free flowing bit of football. So Celtic have big issues in the start of games. Maestro 95 saying my problem yesterday was when Iheanacho was coming deep, no one was going long. I did feel like Iheanacho was a little bit disconnected from the performance yesterday. Not really his fault, I would suggest, but again, I think it just speaks to this idea of there's a disconnection across the team. The midfielders are too far apart. The wingers are not really in the game. Tenecte's kind of just been shown down the left and having to beat a man, and that can be inconsistent at times. As we know, Daisameda was barely in the game until he was moved into different positions in the second half. So there's a lot to consider there. I do think, Brendan Rodgers changed the formation at half-time on Thursday. He said that you might use that again in games where Celtic don't dominate the ball. I would suggest a formation change probably more likely in European football, Ryan, than home games. But for me, someone still needs to be there alongside Callum McGregor more often, because I just think that midfield just isn't what we need it to be. A lot happening elsewhere in Scottish football, as you see. If you look at the Scottish Premiership table, Rangers in 8th. They sacked their manager yesterday, Russell Martin, which obviously is of interest to Celtic, because, as I say, Rangers are one of the clubs in the next clutch of fixtures. What are you expecting from this, and how it plays out in the kind of the story of the season so far, Ryan? Because obviously Russell Martin was a complete disaster, their worst manager in their history and all that.
Yeah.
The likelihood is, or the reality is, that surely a new manager coming in can't be worse, and then that makes it even more important for Celtic to get their act together too, and kick on this season. I think we've all been kind of waiting for the Russell Martin sacking moment, and how they respond to that, but it's crucial that Celtic kick on from here, because I think we've had about as, if you look at the domestically, we've had about as comfortable a start as you can imagine in terms of what else is going on elsewhere. Because you imagine how bad things would be had Rangers started their season well, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Just looking at that table, it really does show how poor a start to the season it has been for Rangers, because they're 11 points behind Hearts already, which is an incredible amount so early on in the season, and that'll be difficult to claw back. I know that there's still plenty of time left in the season, but even if you look at 7th and 8th there, Hibs and Rangers, almost identical results in terms of wins, draws and defeats, but the narrative is completely different for both sides, because Hibs, they've still had good performances here and there against Celtic and other teams, but Rangers, I was watching a show last night and somebody did call him the worst manager in Rangers, at least in their modern history. I think it was a matter of when rather than if when it came to Russell Martin. Some of the scenes outside Falkirk as well would probably say that was accelerated as well. It was just an untenable situation. I don't know who's going to come in to replace him. There's already been loads of names banded about, but I would expect them to do better, as you were saying, than what Russell Martin has done. They still made something like 14 signings in the summer. They made 11 to 14 signings. It was round about that ballpark. I expect them to do better once they do bring a new manager in. They might get a new manager bounce, but for me, Celtic have just got to keep on winning, get back to winning ways as they did yesterday, but continue to win and put that pressure on Hearts. They're the target at the moment. You've got to just ignore what Rangers are doing. Yes, maybe look at some of the scores in the background, but right now Celtic have just got to focus on themselves and getting back to the top of the table. Once they do that, then they should be able to take care of themselves from there. But I just think they'll be feeling a lot better after yesterday with the way that they won the game and the galvanisation that the crowd got with the team as well. It was a good moment between the home support and the fans. There's already a number of videos coming out from yesterday of Kelechi Iheanacho celebrating.
Iheanacho celebrating, running down a touchline, kicking every ball.
He was doing moment. Tactics as well. There's another video where he was actually telling the players what to do in the defence at the end of the game. I presume that was right after Celtic had scored and they were just hanging on for the victory. But that's great to see. There was so many question marks about Iheanacho, and yes, physically, but also mentally, and what Iheanacho Celtic were getting. Was he going to be clued up by everything to do with Celtic? Was he going to be focused on the pressures that playing for Celtic will bring him? He seems to be loving it so far. He's not scored in every game, but he's there and he's involved in games, and that's great to see. Shows that he's locked in and he's ready to go for this season.
Yeah, just a point on Rangers, it's the 5th permanent manager that has left Rangers since Brendan Rodgers has been in charge across his both spells. Mark Warburton left, Pedro Caixinha left, Michael Beale left, Philip Clement left, and obviously now Russell Martin. So, Rodgers is no stranger to a manager leaving and a new manager coming in. It's been the norm of late. So I think Celtic will take it in their stride. The answer from Rodgers, we know what it's going to be. He's probably going to be quite complimentary to the difficult situation Russell Martin was in, and he's going to be entirely focused on Celtic if he's asked about it at all over the coming weeks. I do think it does add something different to the season, because it just breaks up the cycle that we've seen of just absolute failure from across the city into something that, might come together as more recognisable form from what you would expect from the team from Ibrox. But I think you're right from Celtic's perspective. It's just, they keep saying, I think this is a line that's they've either discussed about they're going to say in the media, or they're kind of been told by the PR people at Celtic to say this, but essentially just saying on the Hearts and on the Rangers situation is that they're just not looking at the table and it's far too early in the season, etc. So that's always the message from Celtic, and it's a consistent message from Celtic, so I doubt that's going to change anytime soon. It's just, I think the semi-final coming up is obviously a more interesting occasion as well now, Ryan, because Celtic and Rangers were both awful in that Ibrox derby, and now something has been added to this fixture, something new that Celtic will have to navigate depending on who comes in, and so they obviously need to watch that situation closely.
They do, and I would expect them to, because it is Celtic's biggest rivals at the end of the day. Despite what the league table says, it's Rangers, and people will naturally watch what Rangers do. It's just what we do as rival supporters. You keep a close eye on what your greatest rivals do. It's natural. It's what happens. It's also a real opportunity. Whoever comes in, whoever it's going to be, that semi-final match can be a good way for Brendan Rodgers to get back on the side in Glasgow derbies, because the record recently has not been good, especially within 90 minutes. If Celtic can get a win against Rangers in 90 minutes against whoever the manager is going to be, and we don't know who that's going to be yet, we will in the next week or so, I would presume, it's a real chance for Rodgers to really control that narrative once again, because under Barry Ferguson and then that one game under Russell Martin, he's failed to get a win against Rangers. So with that game coming up, it's a real opportunity for him to instantly get that fixture back.
Yeah, you're breaking up again a little bit, Ryan, but we'll try and persevere and finish off the show. Jason Mudgard saying it's too early to tell if they've turned things around. Some positive things yesterday. Let's hope we can go on a run. Still unbeaten in the league, and I guess this is something that Brendan Rodgers underlines as well. The game against Braga was the Celtic's first real defeat of the season. Obviously we went out on penalties to carry that, but in terms of a 90 minutes, Celtic's first defeat was on Thursday, which is a bit crazy when you consider all the negativity. And I'm not saying the negativity hasn't been deserved, because performances have been poor and everything going on around the club has been pretty shambolic of late. But it is notable that Celtic's form in terms of losing games, they've hardly been in free fall. It's the drawn games that have been a concern, and I guess that was a concern right up to the final moments of yesterday too. I think just Celtic really need to hang on to the positives of yesterday, and I think that's why I'm trying to emphasise them today, because you could get. There's no doubt Brendan Rodgers talks about the reality of Celtic as they're nowhere near their levels, and those starts to matches are just continue to be pretty horrendous, to be frank, Ryan. But you've got to take the energy and the positivity coming out yesterday, otherwise there's no point in being in football, is there? I mean, like Roger says, moments like yesterday, that's what football's all about ultimately, and it's how you build on that now.
I think it's important to have a balance between the positives and the negatives, but to really hammer home the positive points that Celtic got, all 3 points yesterday at home. They kept on fighting until the final whistle, and they got their rewards because they persevered. I also made the point to Tony yesterday, it was a quality goal, the third goal, from the way that it was played through Engels to Balikwisha to Dyson Maeda. It wasn't as if it was a late Stramash in the box or a late ball into the box and there was chaos. It was actually a well-worked goal from start to finish, so they didn't abandon their principles when the going got really tough. And I really like to see that. That shows a togetherness and a belief in what the manager wants his players to be playing. So for me, that's one of the biggest positives, that through all the chaos that was going on around them, the little bit of unrest, well, not little bit of unrest, there was plenty of unrest in the stands, they managed to stay focused, and they got to their main objective because they stayed focused and they got that winning goal yesterday. That's the big positive for me coming out of yesterday. Yes, we will talk about performances, and they need to improve when Celtic come back, but it's much better talking about poor performances when Celtic have won the game rather than poor performances when they've drew the game or lost. So I'm taking that positive. And we've been really negative. We've been realistic, but we've also been negative with the way that Celtic have been as of late. So it's nice to have that positive feeling that Celtic have won a game yesterday.
Jason saying it's not all about the formation, players gelling and knowing each other's game makes for a good team. I think there's an element of that. I mean, I would argue that there's actually not been that much radical change in the starting 11. It's only a few players really starting who, I mean, if you include Sarachi, I guess it becomes different. But just on the fullback situation, I think we're expecting Alistair Johnston back into training in the week building up to Dundee, which will be obviously a major positive. I think starting that game against Dundee is probably a bit ambitious. I think coming back from a hamstring injury, you don't risk anything or throw a player into a situation where he could suffer a setback. But if he does join training early next week, then I would hope that he gets half an hour or something, 20 minutes off the bench, potentially in line to feature for the European game. But certainly, I think the focus for Alistair Johnston is that he's fit and almost fully fit for that match at Tynecastle, because I have worries about going to Tynecastle with that right side so undercooked, and with Brendan Rodgers still not knowing what his wing option is. I think either whether it's Ralston or Donovan, I think the rollback from what Alistair Johnston can give you is notable, and we need him back in the team as quickly as possible.
Yeah, even because it's a daunting atmosphere at Tynecastle as well, and it will be a really loud atmosphere when that game comes along. So you need leaders as well, both yes, he brings on-field quality. He's undoubtedly Celtic's best right-back. Of that, there is no question. But it's those leadership qualities that he brings off the pitch as well. People can rely on him to turn up in big games. He's turned up in big games before for Celtic. He's actually played well at Tynecastle in a number of the games that he's played. It's an area, it's a ground that he will know well. So he's a player that you can count on to play and play well in that game. I think if he's ready, if he is back in training early and he's ready, then I would start him against Dundee. But you could maybe take him off
too
after.
Much, Ryan, is it not? He's been out for a while. You can't just throw him in for the starting 11.
I think it all depends on when he comes back. Maybe I don't know if there's going to be a bounce game in between. Perhaps not. It's all about if the situation is right. Like, I wouldn't throw him straight back in unless he is fully ready to play the game. But even then, you would only be maybe playing him for 60 minutes before bringing him off for Ralston or Donovan. There are important games coming up. I think the Sturm Graz game at home will be important for him. A home game where he'll be looking to attack the ball. But that Hearts game, as you said, is an important one. If he's ready, then play games. But if not, then nurse him back to full health. It's important that he's available for more games than not this season. Because despite Donovan, doing really well coming in, Ralston, I don't think was too great yesterday. I think you really do see the limitations in his game. It'll be great when Alistair Johnston comes back into that side. I think he will feel the difference on that right hand side, both in terms of quality and balance when he returns to his rightful spot at right back.
Red Tim saying we really need a good run of victories to galvanise the squad. Yesterday could be the start of that run. And listen, I do agree with that. I mean, you can, as I say, I think there was plenty of issues yesterday, but it's the same issues that we've seen. I just feel like Brendan Rodgers figured something out about his team yesterday. That's just my gut feeling on it, especially in that second half. I think it clicked that, like, I don't think Daisamere is working on the right side. I think you need to try something else there. I know Tenecte's played well on the left at times, but maybe trying him on the right now. And I know this is it's almost a troubleshooting situation where you're doing it on the fly, and I don't think that is ideal either. But Brendan Rodgers said that's the reality of where the team are at the moment, because there's not been much training. They've not had much time training in terms. It's all been about recovery from matches and kind of building to the next one. I don't think he's had time to really try things out in a training setting. So he is kind of working out on the fly as well. And I guess that's why we might see some kind of more tinkering with the team going forward, I would suggest. I really don't think, just going off Brendan Rodgers' comments yesterday, he still doesn't know what his best attack is, and I guess that is a problem that he needs to figure out quickly. Just to touch on tonight, there's obviously a meeting going on at Celtic Park. I think it takes place at 6 p.m. I'm not sure when information from that will be publicly disseminated. I'm not sure when we'll find out what the outcomes of this meeting went, or how it went, or how receptive Celtic were to the issues. But obviously, last week, Celtic Fans Collective released a statement saying that various supporter organisations, I think 8 were invited in total, and I think there's two representatives from each, though I think some of the groups that were invited are foregoing one of those representatives so that someone from the Celtics Fan Collective goes as well, and there's good kind of representation from this new umbrella organisation that has been set up in a unified fashion. I think we expect that the majority of the chat will be around the points made in the open letter, Ryan, just around recruitment, around a long-term strategy, issues with, governance at the club, in terms of structure and how involved some non-executive directors are, how involved Dermot Desmond is, I think, on the day-to-day running of the club. There are all sorts of issues at the moment. I think dialogue is positive, but only if it's meaningful. I don't think this can just be a tick box exercise for Celtic, and I think the groups going have to all be aligned and have their ducks in a row as well for what could be a pretty pivotal meeting. And again, I'm not expecting massive things to come out of this. It's just the start of a process. But Celtic need to take this seriously, because the groups going, I know, certainly are. Yeah,
it's a starting point, and Celtic have got to take it seriously, but they've also got to get the tone right of what they're saying. The message is one thing with whatever they say tonight, but the tone of it too. They've got to treat those heading to wherever the meeting is happening tonight with respect. and it's got
It's
to
at
be
Celtic Park, just
yeah,
to be
Celtic
clear.
Park.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure. I know there was a couple of people that said that, but I didn't know if there was going to be any, just in case. These things are always subject to change, etc. But I'm hoping that the tone is right, and that it's a positive meeting, or as positive as it can be. Yesterday we saw the. I don't know if the pictures made the rounds, but the banner next to the executives at Celtic Park, it made its way. I think it was at the North Curve in the first half, and then it made its way over in the second half, right before Celtic scored. I think it would have been one of the main talking points if Celtic hadn't have scored yesterday. That image would have probably been shared about more than if Daizen Maeda hadn't scored yesterday. So thankfully, well, one way or the other, I'm glad Maeda scored, but at the same time, it was still a powerful image from where I could see it. Anyway,
if people missed the banner, it said "F the meeting," in less polite terms, it said "F the meeting, resign," and it was unfurled right in front of the director's box in the main stand, right in front of them. So they did a good job of getting it there, because I'd imagine they'll have extra security in that if the stand.
There was a steward hastily making his way over to where the banner was about 5 or 10 seconds after it was unfurled. So I think we've all saw the pictures that have came out after. I don't think they were too happy with that banner being displayed directly underneath them. But tonight's got to be, as I've said before, and at risk of repeating myself, the tone's got to be right. There's got to be, it's got to be taken seriously. The 7 points that were put to the board, I'm hoping that as many of them as possible are answered by the board to the fan organisation tonight, because at the end of the day, and I made this point to Tony in the post-match briefing, we will find out what's been said. The fan organisations will tell us what has been said in this meeting, and I would imagine if it's negative, well, regardless actually of what the message is, it will be broadcast or put out in a statement to the masses quite shortly after. Positively or negatively. They want to keep people in the loop. They want to mobilise the fans. The only way to do that is by keeping them updated with things like this that are happening. And I think we'll find out pretty quickly how the meeting went on, just by both statements and by people actually present at the event as well.
Yeah, I think there's a intent from the people going that there will be transparency about this meeting. This isn't something that's going to be cloaks and daggers about in the aftermath. Although we'll see how long it takes for the information to come out. They might want to properly put forward a response and coordinate that. So there's all sorts. Pinball asking, do we know who is going? I don't know if you mean the fan groups or the representatives from Celtic. I think various Celtic officials are going, but I think the email invite that Celtic put out certainly suggested that Michael Nicholson and Chris Mackay, the Chief Financial Officer, and Michael Nicholson, of course, the Chief Executive, would both be at the meeting to meet with fans. And I believe this isn't going to be like a fan forum type thing where Celtic are just kind of speaking to people. I think it's going to be more of a discussion. I think there's a lot of people going from the Celtic fan side, which again has its challenges. I think with so many people at a meeting, sometimes it could become a bit, they need to have a structure. The groups going, they need to be aligned with what they're going to talk about. In terms of the group going, as I said, there's 8 or so, the various affiliations, there's various supporter clubs affiliations, the Green Brigade, Celtic Trust, Boys Celtic, and as I say, there are people from this new Celtic Fans Collective umbrella organisation also going along. So it's a fairly serious meeting from my perspective, and I guess we'll find out. As I say, I don't think it's going to be particularly meaningful in terms of change, but I think it will give us a steer on where Celtic's thoughts are at the moment, and what they've learned from obviously that ridiculous statement that they put out after the transfer window. I mean, if they just come out with all that patter again and then that is communicated by the fan groups, then it's going to just kick all of this off again. So the Celtic really need to get this right, I think, this evening. It's a shame it's not on pay-per-view, Ryan.
Yeah, I know. I certainly would be paying for it if that was the case. I'm really interested to see what is said tonight, and
they should do a beanbag at Celtic Park. They should have a big screen up and
there was talk about a big OLED screen going to be outside Celtic Park. This would have been the great first event for them to use on the Celtic network. Probably just put it on top and get everybody to watch it. Sell your popcorn at the side, etc. But I think it will be interesting, regardless what is said. And there has to be that. And the point that you made there has to be dialogue. It can't be. It has to be a discussion. It can't be just one side talking at the other. For both sides, I would add that too. There's got to be positive dialogue between both sides, and I'm glad that there's so many different groups going along, because even being at Celtic Park and sampling that atmosphere yesterday, as negative as it was for the majority, so many people have different viewpoints as well. Not everybody has the same opinion. Yes, it'd be boring if everybody had the same opinion, but the Celtic support are so different. It's almost nobody is the same with their viewpoints and opinions about Celtic. So I'm glad that there's so many different groups, because they can paint a clearer picture and a broader representation of the wider support, which will be good. I'm glad that it's not just maybe one or two groups that have the same objectives and motives. That there's 7 or 8 groups going, and they can all express their points. But I do expect that they will have been mobilised correctly, and there will be an organised structure to what they're doing tonight.
Yeah, and I do think there's 1 or 2 groups, one group in particular, I think, who didn't sign the open letter. So there's a varying opinions going about, there's varying viewpoints going about, which I think is fine. David Ferguson, the meeting is a complete waste of time. The board won't compromise at all. They need bought out. There's no other way. And listen, I've said on shows before, just to go back to David's point, I've said on shows before that, I think at some point the conversation does need to turn about Celtic fans' financial contribution to the club, and whether the wider support has the stomach to leverage that essentially for change. So there is an element of that. I do think a meeting like this can be a positive thing, though, and I don't think it's completely meaningless in the way that some do. I know that people do sympathise or agree with the point that David Ferguson's making, which is why I'm sharing it. It's not just the voice of one person there. I've seen that sentiment on various forums and various social media, and of course even the banner at Celtic Park yesterday. So that perception of the meeting is certainly going around. Okay, I think we'll wrap it up there, Ryan. We'll have plenty more to discuss tomorrow. Again, we might even know or have heard about what has happened at the meeting, so we can get stuck into that tomorrow as well. I think Josh will be on tomorrow, so plenty to talk about. Ryan, thank you for your time today. I know you had some connection issues, but I think we got there in the end. Thanks to everyone in the live chat as well, and in the comments below. Let us know what you think of yesterday. I guess we were quite positive about yesterday on the show today, but if you're feeling pretty negative still about everything at Celtic, just the way that first hour went in the match yesterday, then do let us know in the comments below. Yeah, thanks, Ryan.
Cheers, thanks very much for having me.
Okay, we'll see you again next time on the Celtic Way, everyone. As I say, Josh will be on tomorrow with myself, and we've got the weekly show with Hamish coming up as well. We didn't quite manage to get to that last week. There was a problem with the recording of that, which was entirely not our fault, but we will be back on board with that soon. So again, we thank you for watching the channel as always, and we'll see you again next time.